Okay, so have you noticed how AI is like everywhere you turn these days? It seems like every other commercial is trying to sell me on some new AI-powered gadget.
Right. It's the buzzword of the century for sure.
It's like AI this, AI that. But isn't it kind of strange that we use the same term for things that seem totally different? Like, are we really saying that the little robot vacuum cleaner that bumps around my living room is using the same kind of intelligence as, say, a program that writes music?
Yeah, it does make you wonder where the line is.
And that's exactly what we're diving into in this episode, or at least what got us thinking about all this.
We're looking at this new article from the Department of Technology, and they're proposing a whole new framework for classifying AI, which, at first glance might sound kind of dry.
Right, like who cares? Besides some tech people, right? But they make a really compelling case for why it matters, not just for the people building AI, but for all of us.
And it all comes down to control, because if we don't have a clear understanding of what AI is and what it's capable of, how can we even begin to regulate it or ensure that it's used ethically?
Okay, so regulation, ethics, big concepts. But let's back up a bit and talk about these existing classifications the article talks about, because honestly, they're a bit confusing.
Yeah, you've got your ANI, AGI, ASI, which stand for Artificial Narrow Intelligence, Artificial General Intelligence, and Artificial Superintelligence. Sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
Total alphabet soup. And honestly, it feels a little too focused on some distant future where robots are taking over the world.
Exactly. And while that's fun to think about, it's not exactly helpful when we're trying to make sense of the AI that's already impacting our lives. Right here, right now.
It's like we're trying to write the rule book for a game we don't even fully understand yet.
Right, and the rules are changing faster than we can keep up.
So that's where this RMS thing comes in, right? Responsive, memorable, sentient.
Yeah, that's the big idea they're putting forward in this article. It's a new system for classifying AI, and what's interesting about it is that it's focused on what AI can actually do right now, not just some theoretical future capabilities.
Okay, so let's break down each of these categories a bit, because I think understanding what they mean is kind of key to getting the whole picture here.
Absolutely. So let's start with responsive AI.
All right, responsive AI. Lay it on me. What are we talking about here? Give me an example I might recognize.
So think about Deep Blue, the chess-playing program that beat Garry Kasparov back in the day.
Okay, I vaguely remember that. Wasn't that a big deal?
Huge. I mean, it was a really big deal because it was the first time a computer had ever beaten a world champion chess player. And Deep Blue, that's a perfect example of responsive AI. It can make incredibly complex calculations in real time, but it doesn't actually remember past games to learn from them.
So it's not like strategically learning from its opponent. It's more
So you're like a reflex almost. You touch a hot stove, you pull your hand away without even thinking about it. There's no deep thought process there, just an immediate reaction.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So it can be really good at a specific task, but it's limited by its inability to really learn and adapt beyond its initial programming. Right, that makes sense. So that's responsive AI. What about memorable AI?
Well, this is where things start to get really interesting. Because memorable AI, this is where most of the AI we interact with on a daily basis actually lives.
Okay, now we're talking. Like what kind of AI falls under the memorable category? Give us the rundown.
Think about things like ChatGPT, Siri, those personalized ads that seem to know what you want before you do.
Oh, yeah, those are kind of creepy sometimes.
Totally. But that's memorable AI in action. It learns from data, getting better over time by remembering your preferences, tailoring its responses accordingly. And that's why this category is so crucial to think about, especially in terms of regulation. Because if AI is remembering our data, how is it being used? What are the implications for our privacy, even for our own autonomy? These are questions we need answers to.
It's like that old saying, with great power comes great responsibility. And it seems like memorable AI definitely has the potential for both, right?
Definitely. So then we come to sentient AI, which is kind of a whole other ballgame.
Sentient AI, okay. This is where we get into the realm of science fiction, right? Like self-aware robots.
Pretty much. The article makes it clear that sentient AI is still very much theoretical.
So we're not talking about robots taking over the world anytime soon?
Not exactly, but it's important to at least acknowledge that there's a distinction between AI that can process information and AI that might one day actually understand it,
Okay, so sentient AI is like that line in the sand, the difference between mimicking human behavior and actually possessing consciousness.
Exactly. And we're not there yet, not even close. But it's still an important distinction to make, especially as we start thinking about the ethical implications of AI.
Because If a machine actually becomes self-aware, well, that changes everything, doesn't it?
It changes everything.
Okay, so we've got our three categories: responsive, memorable, and sentient. But I bet you're wondering, why should I care about all this?
Right? How does any of this actually impact me in my day-to-day life?
Yeah, like this is all very interesting, but does it really matter if I don't work in tech?
That's the million-dollar question, and honestly, the answer is more complicated than you might think. Because even if you never interact directly with an AI, these systems are already shaping your world in countless ways.
Okay, so give me an example. Like, what does any of this have to do with me scrolling through my phone, for instance?
Well, think about it. Those personalized ads we were talking about, the ones that seem to know exactly what you're thinking, those are powered by memorable AI. And the way that data is collected, used, shared, that's all influenced by the kind of AI classification system we're talking about.
Okay, so if we don't understand how these different types of AI work and how they're being used, then we don't really have control over our own data or even our own online experiences.
Exactly. And that's just one small example. This stuff has implications for everything from healthcare to education to the criminal justice system. It's not just about robots and science fiction anymore. It's about the very fabric of our society.
Okay, so maybe this AI stuff is a bigger deal than we realize. But if these existing classifications are so, I don't know, clunky, and this RMS system is supposed to be better, then how does it actually help us navigate all of this? What's the practical application here?
That's the question we're going to dig into next, because the article doesn't just lay out this new framework. It actually makes a pretty compelling argument for why it matters for the future of AI development and for all of us. So the article really zeroes in on this idea that RMS could be the key to finally getting a handle on AI regulation.
Okay, so less Wild West, more well-organized library. Give me the rundown.
Exactly. Because if we can all agree on what makes an AI, say, memorable as opposed to just responsive, we can start creating regulations specifically for each category.
Okay, so it's about custom-fit regulations, not trying to cram all of AI into one giant box. But what kind of regulations are we talking about here? What difference would it actually make?
Well, let's stick with memorable AI for a second. Remember we were talking about it using our data to learn and personalize our experiences.
Yeah, like those ads that follow you around the internet. Kind of creepy, but also kind of convenient sometimes.
Right, exactly. So what if there were actual laws dictating how that data can be used, especially when it comes to our personal information?
Okay, so if a company is using an AI that remembers my online habits, they can't just use that information however they want. There would be rules.
Exactly. We could see much stricter guidelines around data privacy for anything falling under that memorable AI umbrella. You'd have more control over what data those AI systems are using, how they're using it.
Okay, so more transparency, more control for users like me. That's a win, right?
Potentially, yeah. And it's not just about data privacy either. RMS could also help us address some of those concerns about bias in AI.
Oh, right, because AI isn't inherently neutral, is it? Like, it can inherit the same biases as the humans who create it.
Exactly. Think about something like facial recognition software, or even those algorithms some companies are using to screen job applicants. If those AI systems are being trained on biased data, they can actually end up reinforcing existing inequalities.
Yikes, yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. So how would this RMS system help with that?
Well, with RMS, we could start seeing regulations that require companies to demonstrate that their AI systems are being trained on fair and representative data. It's about building in safeguards from the ground up.
So it's not just about classifying AI, it's about really understanding the potential impact and then taking steps to make sure those impacts are positive.
Absolutely. It's about being proactive, not reactive.
Okay, this is making my head spin a little bit.
Yeah.
But in a good way. But let's play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say everyone loves this RMS idea and it really takes off. Are there any potential downsides we should be thinking about?
That's a great question. And to be honest, it's something the article only briefly touches on, but it's worth considering. I mean, anytime you introduce regulations, even with the best intentions, there's always the possibility they could stifle innovation.
How so? Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, imagine you're an AI developer and you're working on this groundbreaking new project, but maybe your project doesn't fit neatly into any of the existing RMS categories.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Right. So what happens then? Do you try to shoehorn your creation into a category it doesn't really belong in just to comply with the rules? Or do you have to jump through a million hoops to get your project off the ground because it doesn't quite fit the mold.
So in trying to be responsible, we might accidentally limit the potential of AI. That's kind of a dilemma.
It is. It's a balancing act for sure. We want to encourage innovation, but we also have to be mindful of the potential consequences. And finding that balance, well, that's going to be an ongoing process. It's going to require a lot of open dialogue and collaboration.
It feels like we're at this really crucial point with AI where it has the potential to reshape so much of our world. And we're still trying to figure out the rules of the game as we play.
Exactly. And that's what makes these conversations so important, because it's not just about technology, it's about what kind of future we want to create.
It's like we're trying to draw a map of a place that's constantly changing shape right in front of us.
That's a great analogy. And it's why it's so important to have these conversations now while we're still relatively early on in the development of AI.
So we've talked about the potential benefits of RMS, this new classification system, but we've also touched on some of the challenges. But let's zoom out for a second. Even if we manage to perfectly classify every piece of AI out there, is this RMS thing the be-all, end-all solution, or is this just the first step in a much longer conversation?
That is the million-dollar question. And to be honest with you, I don't think there's an easy answer. RMS could be a really solid foundation, but it's probably not the final word on AI classification.
Okay, so what are some of the big, lingering questions we should be asking as AI keeps evolving? Like, what are the things that keep you up at night?
Well, for one, who gets to decide which category an AI falls into? I mean, there are bound to be some gray areas, some edge cases, right?
Yeah.
Especially as AI systems get more and more complex.
So it's not always going to be crystal clear.
Exactly. Like, is this AI memorable, or is it just really, really good at responding in a way that seems like it remembers?
We need, like, judges for AI.
Exactly. We need clear criteria and maybe even some kind of independent body to make those judgment calls.
So, like, referees for the AI world, making sure everyone's playing by the rules.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of unintended consequences. We talked about the possibility of stifling innovation, but what about other unforeseen effects? Like, could putting overly strict regulations on AI actually create, like, a black market for AI development?
Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought about that.
Right. Or could it accidentally concentrate even more power in the hands of a few big tech companies that have the resources to navigate all those complexities?
It's like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, but we don't always know what that reaction is going to be.
Precisely. And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating, but also a little bit unnerving. We're kind of making things up as we go along, and the stakes are incredibly high.
No pressure, right?
Yeah.
Well, on that note, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this AI thing, and we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on it.
Oh, absolutely. This is a conversation that's just getting started.
Well, that about wraps up this deep dive into the wild world of AI classification. We've covered a lot of ground, from those alphabet soup classifications like NI and AGI to the brand new RMS system, and we've talked about some of the really big questions we should all be asking ourselves as this technology continues to evolve. If you want to go even deeper down the rabbit hole, be sure to check out the Department of Technology article. We've got a link for it on our website. And in the meantime, keep those minds curious.